Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's episode, I have got this Philodendron Birkin, which I suspect is severely root bound. So in today's episode, I'm going to be taking it out of this pot, assessing the damage, and then repotting it into a new pot. So I'm going to show you the full process of what I do, what I look out for, and how I repot my plants. I've got a full care guide for this plant, so I'll link to that in the description if you're interested in how to care for this plant. So let's get to the repotting. So with a plant, there's a few things you can kind of look out for to see whether your plant is root bound. So I suspect this plant, this Philodendron Birkin, is root bound for a few reasons really. I'll just take the plant out of its decorative pots. And as you can see with this plant, it doesn't look quite in proportion. The size of the pot compared to the rest of the plant looks a bit out of sorts, so that's one of the kind of telltale signs. Looks a bit top heavy for the plant. I've also noticed that this plant tends to get a little bit thirstier than it used to, needs a bit more water, so that's a good indication that maybe there's not enough soil in here. A few too many roots, so there's not enough soil to hold on to the moisture. Also with this plant, there's a few roots just poking out of the bottom as well, of the drainage holes of the pot. That normally means that the plant has loads of roots in here, too many roots, and it's trying to search for somewhere else for them to grow. And also, if your plant is severely root bound, then you'll start to notice that the pot is starting to bulge. So it might be very compact, it might feel very compact in here. You might start to feel some bulges of the roots. In that case, your plant really is root bound, so you definitely want to get it out of a pot and repot it as fast as possible. So one of the reasons you don't want your plant to be root bound is if there's loads of roots in here, they tend to circle around the perimeter of the plant, and if it gets really root bound, it starts to circle the top of the plant and it starts to strangle the crown of the plant. So you want to avoid that as much as possible and get it into some fresh soil. So I'm going to be potting up into this pot here, which is probably 2 sizes bigger, I guess. That's kind of the maximum size up you want to go. You don't want to go like 4 or 5 up and try and skip having to repot it further down the line. That just means if you've got a pot that's too big, there's going to be too much soil for the plant's roots, and it's going to be too much moisture that the plant is going to be sat in. So you want to just get it into a pot that is in proportion, 1 or 2 sizes up from what it's currently in. So I think we will have a look at the roots of this plant. So I'll just use the lid of this soil box I've got here, put the plant on top of that. So I'm just going to squeeze the pot around the edges just to loosen up the plant. And I'm going to see if I can carefully pull it out all in one piece, which it looks like I can. Looks like these roots at the bottom is clinging onto the pot, which is preventing me from pulling it out. And there you have it. Not too bad actually. Not as bad as I thought it would be, but there is some hefty roots in here. So with this, as you can see at the top here, starting to circle around the top, and if you allow that to continue, then that means that the plant's going to start to choke itself out. It's going to start to choke the crown of the plant. So when we're repotting our plants, we just want to carefully pull apart, tease apart some of these roots just to free them up, stop them circling. So that's what I'm going to do with this. Just start at the bottom and just tease them out. If you break a few of the roots, it doesn't really matter too much. They're quite resilient house plants to being bashed about a little bit. This guy, when I potted it up into fresh soil, should respond by pushing out fresh new growth. With a root-bound plant, you'll start to notice that the growth is a little bit slower, a little bit inhibited because it can't continue to grow its root system, so it stops putting out fresh new leaves. This plant is not as root bound as I thought it would be, but still a little bit. So you just want to loosen up around the edges just to stop the roots from circling around. A few chunky roots at the top there. Just want to make sure that stops circling at the top. break that apart like so, that's better. Looks like the area roots actually. So this is much easier than the last video I did on repotting, where I repotted my caliphate eldergrass. I'll link to that in the description. Much more root bound than this was, some really chunky roots. I had a hard time loosening up the soil and the root system. Okay then guys, I think that's as far as I'm going to go. All the roots have been loosened up. You don't want to go too mad, but a nice root ball here. The soil is nice and moist, not too wet, which is good. So I've been looking after it correctly. That's why this plant looks so healthy, so vibrant. It should respond to being put in a nice fresh soil very well and push out nice new growth. So I will probably just pop that back in there for the time being. And then I'm going to fill up my pot, which like I said, is about 2 sizes bigger. So I've got a mix here that I've made myself. You can buy your own, you can buy a mix ready packaged in a bag for houseplants, but this is just compost mixed with perlite. So it's about 20–30% perlite, 70% compost. And I add perlite to the mix just to give it a nice airy texture, which is good for the drainage of the plant. You don't want to have a compact soil where it gets basically too moist for the plant. So I'll put in a little bit of soil at the base. I'm just going to measure up. You want where the top of the crown was of the plant, you want that to be level with near enough the top of the plant, the top of the pot rather. So you just want to measure it. Maybe got a little bit too much. Get these roots in. Make sure they're all in the pot. I think that's looking okay. So the crown is more or less nearly level with the top of the pot, and that's what you want. So all we need to do now is just backfill around this plant, which is a bit tricky with this one because it's quite a wide plant. So I'm just going to go around and just fill the edges first. Press the soil in. Don't worry about dirtying the leaves too much. So I go around the pot, just so I'm filling it evenly, just so that the plant kind of continues to grow upwards. You don't want it slanting over. Fill it in evenly around the edge of the plant. Just press it in lightly. Give it a tap, just to get rid of any air pockets that might be developing at the bottom of the pot. So we can continue to fill in around. You don't want to press it too hard around the edge. You don't want to compact the soil too much. When we add water to this, it will compact a little bit anyway, so you don't want to go a little bit higher. So I'm just filling this right up to the top. So just take your time with this, guys. There's no rush. You just want to make sure that there's an even distribution of soil in the pot around this plant. You don't want it to grow wonky. You want the plant to successfully root into the new soil that you put in, the new pot. So I'm doing that because I know as soon as I put the water in to this plant, the new soil, it's going to compact a little bit. Gap there. Okay. So I think that is done. As you can see, I've got the soil more or less right up to the top of the pot. Plant is sitting happily in there. Looks really nice. Looks more in proportion now. Bigger pot, so probably half, well, they're equal size, I guess, the pot and the plant, which is what you want to see. So I will give this some water now. Give me a chance to clean off some of the bottom leaves that I've got all dirt all over. So you just want to go around the edge of your plant, around the circumference, and just give it an even amount of water. Make sure all the soil is nice and moist. And you just want to go until you start to see some water coming out of the bottom of the drainage holes of the pot. So you want to give it a good drink all around the soil, and that way it just gets rid of any air pockets that might be lurking in the soil, because you want all the roots to be in contact with soil as much as possible. A little bit in the middle there. And there you have it, starting to come out of the bottom. So I'll let that freely drain. This has been a successful uppotting of this plant. We should start to see lots of new growth. We put it in fresh soil, so plants always like that. They like to be repotted probably once a year, maybe once every 2 years. Gets nutrients into the plant's roots, which depletes over time, so that's why we repot our plants quite often. So I hope you found this video useful, guys. If you did, then please do give it a thumbs up, really helps the channel grow. Check out my care guide video on this plant. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.